Okay, well, I usually give you a heads up a day early.
So, all right, Dr. Carlton Turner is with us. He studied, he's from, University of Mississippi School of Pharmacy and director of its Research Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. And while at UM, he was director of the Marijuana Cocaine Project funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. All right, Dr. Turner, welcome to Evan and Deb in the evenings.
Delighted to be with you, Evan.
So you've actually studied marijuana, because a lot of these people that are telling us that marijuana is going to be the next great thing for everything, I don't think they've done a lot of scientific research, unless you count scientific research getting high in your living room.
Well, I assume Deb is still there with you.
Yes.
One of the things that occurred at the University of Mississippi in the late 60s and early 70s was the federal government set up a research project there to look at the different strains of cannabis from where we get the crude drug marijuana, do all the toxicology, pharmacology, you name it. And I guess you could say I was there at the foundation of it. We used to be known as the marijuana mafia. We did the bibliographies and we papers. And this is a dirty drug, and what I mean by dirty drug is you will never get it past the FDA because there's so many problems with it. There are birth defects that you can see in animals, and when you have something that has birth defects in animals, you're not going to give it to human beings, i.e. the thalidomide case. So This is a very dirty drug, and the people out there talking about it, I talked to one gentleman today, and I told him some things, and he said, I've never heard of that. I said, all you got to do is read the literature. There is a literature that is called peer-reviewed literature, and then there's the social literature that just people publish what they want. So you're probably correct. The people saying we ought to do this, ought to do that, have never been into the laboratory, never seen the psychiatric wards, and never seen the devastating consequences this drug has caused. It may not kill you, but it causes devastating consequences.
Right. Well, and let me ask you about that, about the studies, because over and over you hear people say that typically they're the people that want it legalized. There's never been studies done. The government shut down all those studies. They've never tested it. They've just ignored it. That's what you're saying is the complete opposite. It's absolutely untrue that the government did sponsor studies on marijuana.
The government sponsored plenty of studies. Lilly did a lot of studies. The other pharmaceutical companies did a great deal of studies. And actually there's a drug on the market, a couple of drugs on the market that come from the constituents of the cannabis plant. But nobody wants to talk about that. Marinol is out there for appetite. And Nabalon was one from Lilly. The only problem with these drugs that you put out there, the side effects are so devastating, some people refuse to take them. But Marinol works very well for reducing nausea and doing some other things. The good things about the cannabinoids, and these are products that are only found in the cannabis plant, the good things about cannabinoids individually, they don't know the plant exists. But if there's any good scientific paper, the marijuana lobbyist grabs on that and calls it marijuana. But when you see something negative about those cannabinoids, the marijuana lobbyist says, wait a minute, that's not marijuana. I'm talking about a different product. So yes, the studies have been done for, the last time I looked at that is when I left the university, there's probably been over 12,000 studies done, ranging from products for epilepsy to all kind of problems associated with it.
Right. So now tell us, what are your biggest concerns about the medical marijuana amendment here that's on the ballot for November?
Well, Evan, we have to have a little bit of a conversation about the word. If it were medical, why doesn't the American Medical Association? Why doesn't the American Psychiatric Association? Why doesn't the American Epileptic Foundation? Why do these people recognize it in medicine? No organization deals with medicine recognizes this. So I don't use the word medical marijuana. If you want to call it medical pot, and with the connotation that's bad, you can. But what's happened is this has been the guise to get marijuana legalized.
Right.
There's a couple of my friends on the other side of the area that said, hey, we're not going to get it legalized, but we're going to make it as medicine, and we're going to call it medicine. I'll give you a very good example. We had a guy named Bob Randall. He used to run around the country with cigarettes that were produced from the marijuana grown in Mississippi, and said, look at me, I'm smoking marijuana for my glaucoma, and it's a prescription item. First of all, it can't be a prescription item because it's not a medication. Secondly, I asked Bob at a meeting one day, Bob, are you willing to give up your regularly prescribed medication and only smoke marijuana for your glaucoma, and he says, CT, I'm no fool. These are the kinds of things that are out there. And so when someone comes to me and says, I'm smoking marijuana and it's doing this, I'm saying, do you still have your regularly prescribed medication, or are you just willing to smoke marijuana for it?
Right, right. Well,
so I have a lot of problems with the way it's structured.
Right. So now how will people get their medical marijuana if this amendment passes?
Well, that structure has to be set up by the state government, and they'll have to set up a program. I assume that if you follow the same thing that you have out in some of the other states, I know the language we have is no age limit, where a lot of states have an age limit of 821. Florida has no age limit, and they say, well, young people need it too, and they forget the brain damages and the problems there. There would be dispensaries. There would be signs out that says, get your marijuana recommendation here, because it can't be a prescription. And I guess the bottom line is, if you think the pill mills were bad, where'd you see the pot docks?
Oh, I've seen them in California when I was out there.
Yeah.
I was walking down, what was it, the beach, what's that beach?
Venice
Beach, Venice Beach. And there was like a number of them, just these green, like, storefronts, and you just walk in, fill out a form, and before you know it, you walk out the door with a prescription.
But if you listen to Mr. Morgan, he'll say, we will not have that happening in Florida. I don't see how you can stop it.
Oh, well, you know what he'll wait to do? See, hey, get everybody high, then they'll get into car accidents, and he'll make even billions more.
Well, I won't go there, but I'll put it this way, that if you can't control the guys writing a prescription with a prescription pad for painkillers, when the physician can be held accountable. With this bill or this amendment, you can't hold the user accountable, you can't hold the supplier accountable, and you can't hold the person that recommends it accountable. So who do you hold accountable? You hold accountable the one that owns the automobile they're driving, or the company they work for when they get in it. And certainly, if you can't hold them accountable, what's to prevent a person from making recommendations? You can't take his license away from him.
Right.
It's just you can drive a Mack truck through that thing.
Well, I think you make a great point with the pill mills. And you can't argue how dangerous a lot of those pills are, from OxyContin and the rest of them. And you look at that, we couldn't control that. Doctors were writing prescriptions left and right. People are hooked on these psychoactive drugs.
Yep.
I mean, they're literally dying from overdoses, but they think, hey, you know what? It's all going to be good with marijuana. We'll be able to grow very nicely.
Well, their argument doesn't hold water. Cocaine is a Schedule II drug. It's used every day in surgeries. The painkillers are used every day. They're controlled. You can follow those. So their logic of making it legal and we'll control it is fraught with inconsistencies.
Right. Well, on the other side of it, too, if someone says, well, I'm approved to get medical marijuana, well, you know what? They say, well, why not use the street drug as well, right? Then they figure...
That's basically the same thing. It's just that the street drug may not be as potent. When we were doing the work in the 70s and 80s, the average potency of marijuana, you didn't want to have anything over 2% THC in a cigarette that you were doing research with, because it was referred to as too hot to handle. They got bad reactions from it.
Right.
You're looking at stuff now that's upward to 25% THC. So it's a different world. Plus, there's a new thing called dabbing, which you smoke with electronic cigarette-type conditioners, and that is up in around 70-80%. So it's a totally different world.
Well, we got to take a short break, but you know what? You intimated early on about some of the side effects, and I want to talk to you more about that. We're talking right now to Dr. Carlton Turner, 1250 WINS WHNZ, Evan and Deb in the evenings. All right, we're talking right now to Dr. Carlton Turner. We're talking about medical marijuana and the legalization of it. And to give you a quick background again, full research professor at the University of Mississippi School of Pharmacy. He has done plenty of studies on marijuana, cocaine, specifically the Marijuana Cocaine Project funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Dr. Turner, so let me ask you this. When you look at the other side of it, you got, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. You probably saw the documentary. Everyone I know in the world has probably seen it. How do you respond to that, that here is a little girl that nothing else could work except for marijuana?
Well, it's not marijuana you're talking about. That's
okay.
where the misnomer is. What they're looking basically one of those problems that you have. Pardon me, get this mobile phone here turned off. That's
I
one of the
wasn't sure
problems.
that or...
Yeah. Well, you know, it's when you look at it from that perspective. Excuse me.
Right.
I've got a frog in my throat here. I don't normally do this, but for some reason, I guess it's the day and the humidity around you and all the pollen floating around.
Right.
But when you look at what Sonia Gupta came up with, he looked at cannabidiol, which is an extract now. It's an extract of the cannabis plant. There are three types of cannabis plant. There's a fiber, which is usually referred to as hemp. Then there's an intermediate type, which you use to make hashish out of. Then there's a drug type, which you make the marijuana and sensibilia out of. And what he was looking at was a purified extract of the cannabis plant that was high in cannabidiol and low in THC. That's not marijuana. But what, as I said before, anytime you find something good about a product that comes from the cannabis plant, the marijuana lobby calls it marijuana. And anytime it's bad, they say, well, that's not marijuana. This is a disingenuous case. He should have said, these are cannabinoids, rich extract. This is not smoking. This is not marijuana as we know it. But he didn't do that. Now, cannabidiol is available in Europe for epileptic seizures. It is a purified product from the cannabis plant, and it's available in this country. I think there's a school down, not a school, but a center in Miami will start that study in the near future. So, yes, cannabidiol and some of the individual cannabinoids have some possibilities. The only problem we found when we did the work in humans back in the 70s and early 80s was you build up tolerance to it. So that's the question now. How long will this last? And I hope it will work, because that's one of the holy grails. That's what our medical community is all about. When you take your child into to see a physician and he says, I need to give you penicillin, he doesn't say, look, don't worry about penicillin. That's a pure product. That's FDA controlled. You can't trust the FDA. Go home, get you some moldy bread, let your kid eat the moldy bread. That's right. The same way.
Right, right. So now let's take Charlotte's Web, because that's what is exactly on the ballot, right? That's what would be approved. Am I right, wrong? Tell me about that.
Well, if the ballot passes, Charlotte's Web is an extract that's made out in Colorado. You don't know what's in it. Every time you read something, they tell you it's a different composition of matter. You don't know how they make it. They don't tell you that. But it's being used to dose these young kids, and I assume if you pass the amendment here, then you could make anything like that here that you wanted to. You could make it in the state. You could grow the plants in the state and do that. If you, quote, do what they're saying they're going to do for legalizing for medicine, you're going to have cookies, you're going to have candy, you're going to have lollipops. You will have everything here under the guise of marijuana. And that's exactly what's happening out in Colorado. And I have not been to California except one time since they made it a, quote, legal product. But Colorado is sort of the apex now, and all of those would be available here as I understand it.
So then let me ask you this question. So then why isn't there a lobby? Why isn't there a group saying, you know what, where we need to go is cannabidiol and those types of product, the Marinol, and some of them are already legal, like Marinol. Those things are for prescription. Why aren't we headed in that direction? Why are we letting, in a sense, the tail wag the dog?
Everyone talks about the cigarette lobby, and what they ought to be worried about is the marijuana lobby.
Right.
George Soros is spending millions and millions of dollars every year. The late Peter Lewis did the same thing. Zimmerman of Men's Warehouse, the guy that owns Progressive Insurance, donates a tremendous amount of money, and their goal is legalization of marijuana, period, then legalization of other substances. The other side is not funded. The other side is fighting a defensive battle. You look at here, you don't find many people in the media saying this, we ought to go slow with this. You don't find many people writing in the newspaper saying we ought to go slow with this. We know a lot more than people think we know. They're being overrun by a very powerful lobby for legalizing marijuana. And you can couch it any way you want. That's the ultimate goal, because we got a tape. I've seen a tape of the strategy session that says we know we can't get it legalized, but let's get it under the guise of medicine, and then we'll get it legalized. And that's where they're headed.
Right. And so, obviously, like you said, the cannabidiols, they do have medicinal benefit. But overall, what is the medicinal benefit of marijuana in relation to cancer, glaucoma, MS? I mean, is there really a medical benefit to marijuana?
Well, if you smoke marijuana, let's just take it like this. You go to see an oncologist, and the oncologist says, I'm sorry to tell you, but you have cancer. And if you smoke, first thing they tell you to do is quit smoking. So there is nothing there. You can say it's for pain relief. There is some analgesic properties of delta-9 THC. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at what we know, there have been many, many studies on glaucoma, human studies. The first real big clinical study that was done with marijuana was done on glaucoma. It doesn't prove to be effective. You look at multiple sclerosis as a product on the market in Europe. It's an extract of the cannabis plant that seems to be doing well in some of the that kind of disease states. But it was approved through the regulatory process. You look at the cancer issue, and you got one of pain, and you got one of nausea. And the nausea, basically, if you have chemotherapy, you have nausea in most cases, then that's what the Marinol is on the market for. But there are better products out there. But I'm telling you that as we move forward with this, some of the cannabinoids that are already on the market may have other cannabinoids on the market, but it won't be the smoked marijuana that everybody wants to walk around with. The other approach is, if you're high on marijuana, you don't worry about anything else.
Right. That's definitely true. I mean, Dr. Turner, I like what you're talking about, that you're bringing this information to light. It's unfortunate that other side you're talking about, they don't have the money, they don't have the power to push this out there. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are being sold a bill of goods. And I agree with you. I've agreed with that right at the beginning, that this is definitely the goal is to legalize marijuana in total. And I got to tell you, if what's happening in Colorado is true with the amount of tax revenue they're going to bring in, I think we're sunk. I think the governments are all going to approve it just because they want the tax money.
Well, if you look at the RAND study in California, when it went into the details of the tax revenue is going to be greatly exceeded by the expenditures to treat the people. For example, 45,000 young people between the ages of 15 and 17 go into the emergency room every year because of countless problems. 45,000. Now, if you had any drug taking those young people into emergency room, any drug, and say 1,000, you'd have every legislator chomping at the bit to get rid of that drug, take it off the market.
Right.
So the cost that they're getting, their short-term benefits they may get, boy, the long-term problems are going to be unbelievable, because you have to worry about the problems you're creating with these young people. That brain is forming, and they say, well, we're going to keep it out of the young people. That's baloney, and you and I both know it.
They're not successful in keeping alcohol out of young people's hands. How are they going to be successful with pot? Oh, my God.
And the psychiatric cost is going to go through the roof. Automobile accidents are going to go through the roof, and the whole negative consequences. It's like Jerry Brown said, basically, you have to decide how many people you can have stoned if you still want to have a productive state and a productive nation.
Wow.
That's from Moonbeam, the governor of California.
Well, you know what? You both make a great point. Dr. Turner, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I wish you good luck in what you're doing out there.
Well, thank you so very much for you and Deb for having me.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great evening. Bye.
All right, tuberculosis, let's get into another heavy topic. It's a heavy evening.